Welcome to the 4th annual 3-Minute Thesis event brought to you by the College of Graduate Studies and Research at NMU and made possible by the generous gifts of time of so many people on and off campus, who we will introduce you today. We're here to celebrate student research across campus and across academic levels. So thank you for joining us on this beautiful February day in the UP. We're so pleased to welcome student researchers here at NMU and spotlight them in the final stages of their graduate programs, as well as the McNair Scholar undergraduate researchers who will be sharing their work with you here. I'd like to thank their faculty advisors and mentors who've been inspiring and supporting their work throughout their journeys in the research process. In addition, I'd like to thank President Schuling for her leadership and consistent support of research at NMU. She's made it possible to initiate and continue to hold this event every year, because actually this is the 5th annual year, which is kind of a milestone. I'd also like to thank the College of Graduate Studies and Research team, Janelle Taylor, Heather Pickett, Tyler Thompson, Angela Rasmussen, Stacy Schwenke, Tess Sayan, Lindsay Hakala, Chelsea Sundberg, and Li Zhang, who are working hard behind the scenes at this very minute to 1, run things smoothly, and 2, keep track of me and everyone else who's participating. I'd also like to give a particular shout out to Janelle Taylor for, as always, being prepared for anything, including a last-minute pivot to an online format. I'll tell you, it looks much easier than it really is. And a huge thank you to our judges who are volunteering their time to support and celebrate our student researchers. And I'm going to introduce them to you here and in alphabetical order. So judges, if you're ready, I'm not going to introduce them, sorry, they will introduce themselves, but we'd first like to welcome Judge Mr. Tom Anthos. Tom?
Hi, good afternoon. Tom Anthos. I am the owner and president of Trimedia Environmental and Engineering Services here in the Great Lakes region. We are scientists and engineers and look forward to hearing the presentations from these local students and excited to interact with the group. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time and expertise. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Dan Arnold. Dr. Arnold?
Yeah, I see you got me primarily as director of the Superior Health Foundation, which I have been since its establishment. But I'm a retired medical oncologist, means I did a significant amount of on my video. Means I did a significant amount of clinical research over the years. And for many years, I've sat on the Institutional Review Board for Northern Michigan University, which approves the ethical quality of all human research.
Thank you so much for your time here today, Dr. Arnold. And next, Ms. Amy Berglund. Ms. Berglund?
Hello there. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. I am the Director of Business Initiatives with InvestUP. InvestUP is an economic development organization that covers all 15 counties of the Upper Peninsula. We are a 501c3 and largely privately funded by employers that represent about 7% of the employment in the Upper Peninsula. So excited to hear the presentations today, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And finally, Ms. Megan Morrison. Ms. Morrison?
Hi, thank you. I'm Megan Morrison. I'm the Social Responsibility Advisor for Eagle Mine. So we're the only primary nickel mine in North America. So I advise the company on community engagement and sustainability issues.
Thank you. And again, judges, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it, and we couldn't do this without you. Now, I'll introduce Ms. Janelle Taylor, Coordinator of Graduate Student and Research Affairs, to give you a little background about the 3-minute thesis phenomenon that is a global phenomenon, and get things off and running, because Janelle is the glue that keeps us all together. So Janelle.
Thank you, Lisa. Also, the real glue here is Dean Eckert and all her amazingness in running the show over here at Grad Studies. So I'm going to attempt to work my slides here. And go back a little bit and just let you know that we are coming here from graduate studies and research, and we have an amazing amount of programs to fit kind of any student. So we're out there, we're interested in research, we're interested in reaching out to new students, we're interested in reaching out to the community. And we have all these things that you can certainly look up on the website and read better. Our other students today are undergraduates. They come from the McNair Scholars Program. They are a U.S. Department of Education funded grant that offers internships and research opportunities to students who are underrepresented. So that's our first group of students speaking, and then the graduates will be the second one. So 3 Minute Thesis is actually an international competition. It is currently held in a whopping 900 universities in 85 different countries. It was first started in Australia in 2008 and kind of took over the world. So NMU got on board about 5 years ago, which actually is not that bad given the timeline and how late NMU is to most things. We managed it pretty quickly, and it's actually still spreading through the US. We're on the front end of that one. The idea is essentially that you can present all of your thesis, dissertation, scholarship, research in 3 minutes, kind of like an elevator speech. So it's supposed to go to an audience that maybe isn't in your field and doesn't know a lot about what you're doing and how you would explain that to someone in that brief period of time and get them interested. So that's the main concept. So just so you know, the students are working with one static PowerPoint. They're not allowed to have electronic media, no external props. They do this by memory. We were originally intending to have the students and the judges at least live today, but given the snow day here in the UP, we have moved it all online, so it's a little bit different format, but the students have memorized and are able to give these speeches on their own, and they will be doing it within 3 minutes, and we will judge from there. So just so you know, the judges, our panel of judges, are looking at engagement and communication and comprehension and content. So basically the themes that they're really going for in 3MT is something that connects with the audience and something that can be understood by a large amount of people and really makes you want to know more about that topic. Now remember, everyone in this webinar right now has an opportunity to be a judge. So our main judging panel that you were introduced to a second ago, they will do the first judging, the first place and the runner-up category judging for both McNairs and the graduates. The People's Choice is the third option in this format. That is a vote by everyone who is here in attendance at our Zoom webinar today. So at the end of the McNair students, and then again at the end of the graduate students, we will launch a poll, and you will then be able to choose which student you think did the best job presenting. And those students also win a prize at the end. So everyone pay attention and actually think about these things because you have a role to play as well. So just so you know, as I mentioned, we'll have the audience polls. We will also have a Q&A at the end of the event. We're going to let all the students present and do all that first, and then let the Q&A happen while we kind of total up the scores and prepare to figure out who won. So there is a Q&A function in your Zoom. You simply pick that, and you can put your question in the chat. And then we have someone here from the Graduate Studies office who is going to be able to voice your question for you and kind of direct it to the right student. We may not be able to get to each one. Just so you know, if we don't get to your question, it's nothing personal, just depending on how many people are asking questions. We'll have to do a few and then kind of move on with the process. Also note that we will have a little bit of downtime between each presenter. That's because our judging panel needs to kind of fill out a little bit of information about each one, and they need to take a second to kind of think about it. They have a few different metrics that they have to mark the student on. So we'll have a little bit of trivia between each one, but also just a little bit of downtime to kind of prepare yourself and think about your Q&A questions at that point, right when that student's done. That means we are at our first student. So our first student is Aaliyah Edwards. She's a McNair scholar in chemistry, specifically in forensic biochemistry. and her advisor is Dr. Philip Yangaru. She will be talking about the development of a nucleic acid-based fluorescence ATP biosensor. And bear with us as each person comes up, we'll have them turn on their camera and turn on their mic, and then I'll kind of fade into the background and let that person present. Provided I can see that Aaliyah is doing things.
Yeah, I'm here.
There you are, okay. Then I will go away and let you start.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about the development of a nucleic acid-based fluorescence ATP biosensor. Nucleic acid sequences have the tendency to form different structural conformations, and the one that we're all familiar with is the double-stranded helix. However, this is one of many structures that DNA can form. One of these such structures is formed by guanines. Guanine in a strand of DNA tends to self-associate and will form a four-stranded structure known as a G4 quadruplex, or just G4. These G4s are stabilized by monocations, and they form a binding pocket, which we can see in figure 1. This binding pocket can be used to bind small molecules, and in this project, we used ATP as our small molecule. We wanted to see if the G4 structure has a correlation with ligand binding activity in DNA. So we used an FAM fluorescein label, and we determined the binding affinity of the aptamer with ATP against other NTPs, which are nucleotide triphosphates. And so, as we can see in figure 2, the ATP has a very strong binding curve. It's hyperbolic, and when tested against the other NTPs, they showed very little inconsistent binding. And so these results indicate that the structures formed by this sequence involving the G4 have very strong binding with ATP and very little affinity toward the other NTPs.
All right, thank you. That means that we are at our first trivia time. While the judges write out their thoughts, and hopefully everyone in the audience thinks about it as well, we're going to distract you and start out with our first question, which is the easiest one we have. I guess it's easy if you went to NMU. It's probably not that easy at all if you didn't. So our first question is, what was the original name of NMU and what year did it open? So we'll give you a minute or two to think about that. Well, you all are better at this than I am, because you all realize that the Q&A can actually be used as a trivia answer section, which I had not thought of until just now. So we actually have a trivia winner this time, at least for speed. I assume a lot of other people probably just kept the answer to themselves. But we've got Joe Lubig in lead with the correct answer. I believe the correct answer. My Q&A person didn't specify if they were right. So the original name of Northern was the Northern Normal School. It was a teacher's college, and it opened in 1899. And has a picture of at least one of the first buildings. To be honest, I'm not sure which one it is, but it's a real old one. And Joe, we will mail you something to your office. No promises on what that is. All right. We'll get back to our students and actually let them present real things. So our next presenter is Mandy Bonesteel. Mandy is a McNair Scholar in sociology, and she is presenting The Case Against Meritocracy. I'm going to make sure Mandy has time to get herself up and running here.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. All right, thank you. So I did a critical analysis on a book by Joe Littler a couple semesters ago that I would like to talk about a little bit here. So years ago, I decided to go and take a training on how to sell cars during the economic crisis of 2008 after I was laid off from my job. And one of the stories that our trainer told us really made an impact on me. So at this high-end dealership, a man drove up, beat up work truck, starts to get out and look at the cars on the lot. Seasoned employees saw him through the window, scoffed, told the new guy, our trainer, don't bother, that guy can't afford anything here. But the kid is new and he wants to make a sale, and it's good business practice to at least greet your customers, no matter who they are. So he goes outside, and when he finally reaches the man who's in work jeans and muddy boots, it's actually Clint Eastwood. And he did sell him a car, by the way. But this is an example of poverty bias. So while clearly Mr. Eastwood is not poor, the perception of his socioeconomic status created a bias against him, and people were unwilling to even approach him to sell him a car because they thought he couldn't afford it. So in Joe Littler's book, Against Meritocracy, Culture, Power, Myths of Mobility, Littler says, meritocracy offers a ladder system of social mobility, promoting a socially corrosive ethic of competitive self-interest, which both legitimates inequality and damages community by requiring people to be in constant competition with each other. So what is meritocracy? It's a social system where people rise through the ranks of society based on merit. In other words, how hard they work. And American society has this notion that the harder you work, the higher you rise in society. And by rise, of course, you mean how rich and powerful you become. But how accurate is this concept? And this is what we looked at was, are we all created equal? Are we all given equal opportunities? Is a baby born into poverty just as able to rise up in society as one born into wealth? No. So let's look at why not. The wealthy family has time to spend with their child. They have money for nutritious food. They have money for clothes, safe housing, books, toys, tutors, and then college. Maybe they give their child a car on their 16th birthday so they can get a job. These parents are well known and influential in their community, so their child gets a pretty good job. The baby born into poverty has parents who also grew up poor, who left school early to get jobs and help their own parents pay rent. They can't afford to buy nutritious food. They make $10 an hour or $10 over the cutoff to get Medicaid, but they certainly can't afford health insurance. They work maybe more than 2 jobs. There isn't time to spend reading or playing with their children, and they can't even afford these fancy educational toys or even books. They don't have a car. And on this child's 16th birthday, they leave school to get a job within walking distance to help their own parents pay the rent. These 2 children do not have equal opportunity to rise through the social ranks of society. This bootstrap ideology, the concept that the poor should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps and work harder to rise, is a cultural myth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. All right. So that means we'll let the judges write out their thoughts and we will invest in another trivia time. So this time, if you know the answer, put in the Q&A. First person to write it in wins. I feel this will be quick as well. So this NMU alum and oldest US Olympian recently visited the start of the UP 200.
That was a very quick response. We've got a winner.
All right.
We've got Elizabeth reporting Nick Baumgartner.
Yay! Elizabeth, you are correct. And we even got a picture to prove it. We all are very quick on the trivia, so now you're just gonna have to stare at the trivia for a minute while the judges catch up. Probably a good time to mention everyone should meet Tess Sayan of the Sponsored Programs Office at NMU. She is our voice of the Q&A and now the trivia winnings.
Hello.
Yes. All right. So that means our next student present is Gwendolyn Murray. She is a McNair Scholar in the Mathematics Department. Her advisor is Dr. Joshua Thompson. Gwendolyn will be presenting surfaces as interplay between topology, geometry, and algebra.
And do I start my video as well?
Yes. When you start it, then I'll switch you over to make sure you're good. Okay. Yep. Okay. You are solid. Here's your slide.
Okay. So you may be wondering what topology is, but even more, you may be wondering why there's a donut on a slide about research. And my research can actually explain both of those things to you. So topology is the mathematical study of surfaces and spaces. And the donut's there because my research studies a shape that topologically resembles a donut. And my research will actually take that donut and deform it and study it. So the thing with topology is that most people have a hard time grasping is the fact that topology doesn't really study numbers. We study different properties of mathematics, and those properties are called invariant properties. So what I mean when I say that is, take, for example, a body of water. We don't care so much about how much water is in that body of water. We don't care how deep it is. We care about, is it wet? Can you see through it? Is it clear? Take, for example, a block. We don't care what's the length, the width, and the height. Is that block soft? Is that block hard? What color is that block? Now, going back to our donut, let's look at it from the point of batter. Is that batter runny? Is that batter thick? Is it thin? When we go to measure that batter, we may take a measurement, but then we can stretch the batter and it's a different measurement. We can squish the batter and it's a different measurement. Now, that said, lay that batter into a donut mold and bake it. What do you have? Now you can measure it. It has formed and it has structure. And therefore we can wrap a string around and measure and take different analytical measurements. And now we've applied what's called a geometric metric. And in doing so, we can take those measurements and analyze the data and draw conclusions from them. This is what I want to do to the surfaces that I'm studying. But even further, I want to take the algebra of these surfaces. So I want to apply functions to these surfaces utilizing algebra such as x squared equals y or 3x plus 5 equals y. But I want to use more advanced functions. And in doing so, going back to our donut, I'll take pans that have strange shapes. I'll pour my batter into them. I'll put them in the oven, pull them out and measure them. And my strange donuts will hopefully show patterns that were not otherwise expected. And I can draw conclusions from those patterns. Now, the further I go in my education, hopefully we'll start seeing some order from this. And my research will produce ideas that we did not expect before. And as I go further and further in my research, hopefully I'll get more answers that were not expected. And we'll see different orders that we did not see before. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gwen. You did it. That finishes out our McNair students. So now we have, this is the end of our McNair portion. So now we're entering into our first People's Choice section. So that means that there will be a poll coming up to everyone who's zooming in that you can answer whoever you thought did the best out of our McNair scholars. We will announce winners at the end because that gives us a chance to announce all the different types of winnings all at once. All right, so we're going to give it one more minute. We have 8 people left to vote. So if you're one of those 8, make your choice now. And then we'll move on and assume some people just don't want to vote or are so blown away by the research that they're unable to think right now.
poll has now ended. Thank you so much for your feedback.
All right, that means we get to start the graduate section. Let's see, so we're jumping right into it with Nicole Thomas. Nicole's a graduate student in psychological science, and her advisor is Dr. Amber Lacrosse. She is speaking about the relationship between a polyprotein E gene expression and chemotherapy-induced cognitive impairment. Nicole will help you with that word. I am not in this field.
Okay. So in 2021, there was 1.9 million new cases of cancer in America. Owing to advances in cancer treatments, more and more of these people are surviving. This also gives us the chance to study what life is like after surviving cancer. And what we see is a lot of these survivors are saying that they have these cognitive deficits that did not happen to them before they underwent chemotherapy. These are called chemotherapy-related cognitive impairments, or CRCIs. Impairments can include things like trouble multitasking, trouble keeping up in social situations, and a general brain fog. And as you can imagine, these can be quite detrimental to a person's personal life, work life, and general confidence. When we test these individuals in the lab with current available measures, objective measure tests, CRCIs can actually be quite difficult to diagnose because most of our measures are aimed at detecting the deficits that go along with traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, and dementia, and CRCIs can often be more subtle than this. So this difference between the subjective, what people are telling us is happening, and the objective measurements results says that the test measurements are just not good enough. They're not sensitive enough. So here we can bring in a promising biological marker that can be a more reliable diagnostic measure. This is a gene called a polypoprotein E4, or ApoE4. ApoE is related to a cholesterol carrier. It maintains lipid homeostasis within the brain. And ApoE4 is an allele that is already known to be associated with the development of other neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia. And since a lot of the symptoms of CRCI overlap with symptoms of these other diseases, it may be that ApoE4 is a predisposing factor of CRCIs. So my thesis will be aimed at the detection of ApoE4. We're going to use a technology called digital droplet PCR, which is a gene amplification technique. We're going to take DNA samples from cheek swabs from patients that have had chemotherapy in the past, are now cancer-free, and also self-report symptoms of CRCIs. We're going to compare these against healthy controls. This study will add to the growing body of research about the subject, and we hypothesize that ApoE4 is a predisposition factor for CRCIs. Exploring the human genome is important to educate and prepare cancer patients, and also to aid the oncologists to make the best, most educated decisions possible for their patients. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you, Nicole. All right. Nope, that one didn't zoom in. Well, here's our next trivia question. As our judges write down their thoughts. The land upon which NMU is situated is the ancestral homeland of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy. Which tribes do the Three Fires refer to? The trivia is a little harder here in the middle. But please put it in the Q&A if you have an answer. I'll go ahead and say alternate spellings are probably okay. Sorry, Tess.
Oh, I was just gonna say we've got a response, but it doesn't quite fit. Okay, Elizabeth has responded once again with one of the three. We've got two others. She's reported Ojibwe.
No one says we can't work together on the answers.
Okay, and we've got another response that has fulfilled our correct answers. So that combination would be Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa. So thank you, Annie. And thank you, Elizabeth, for your correct responses.
Awesome. All right, we will move on to the next graduate participant. So our next graduate student is Nahir Negron Fernandez. He is in exercise science and is advised by Dr. Matthew Kilgus. He'll be talking about the effect of step rate training on factors that influence running economy and biomechanics. So I'll move your slide in, but then Nahir, if you can camera on. Got it. All right, there you go.
So imagine you are a recreational runner in an alternative universe where running is actually fun and engaging and not your worst nightmare. You have signed up for a marathon in which you and your friend will race. And while both of you agreed on finishing the race as your goal, you want to make sure that you claim undeniable victory when crossing the finish line. However, both you and your friend are both well trained and have very similar VO2 maxes, which is the maximum amount of oxygen your body can use during exercise and is also the main indicator of running performance. So how do you gain that advantage? Another indicator is called running economy. This is identified as a demand for energy needed to run at a certain velocity. Unlike VO2 max, which tends to plateau the more you train, running economy can improve 20 to 30% in athletes with unchanging VO2 max, meaning that it would take you less energy to run at the same intensity and velocity than someone with a similar VO2 max. So how can we train running economy to be effective, simple, injury reducing, and mechanically advantageous? This is where my thesis project hopes to answer. This is what my thesis project hopes to answer. The idea came from clinical rehabilitation, where gait training or the training of walking is used to help patients with disabilities, injuries, and post-surgical procedures to walk more efficiently. Recent research has uncovered that gait training can be applied to running, and one aspect of gait training is called step rate, which has been seen in athletes to be elite athletes to be a lot higher than recreational runners. My thesis project aims to create a simple supplemental training program that implements a higher step rate training that will increase recreational runners' running economy by improving their overall running gait. My study will use 3D motion captures, cameras, and force plates, and I hope to also determine if this method of training can also reduce the magnitude of different mechanical factors that are associated with running injuries. So as you train for your marathon to achieve undeniable victory, and many other runners continue to strive for greater accomplishments, the focus of training should not just be strength and speed, but rather the efficiency of how they run. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. All right. We will give our judges some time again and engage in another trivia. So this one is, born in Ishpeming, Michigan, this Nobel Prize winning chemist, former chancellor of UC Berkeley and advisor to 10 presidents, discovered elements that changed the periodic table and is to date the only person for whom a chemical element was named during his lifetime. Okay, it got a little easier again if you're an avid NMU person.
Yes, that was answered quite quickly by Susie Seaborg.
You are correct. And now we get to look at the double pictures of Glenn Seaborg for a minute while we let our judges catch up. I feel like it has to be slightly unnerving to see yourself on a wall like that. All right, we will move on to our next graduate student. Our next student is Cole Holt. He is a student in psychological science, and he is advised by Dr. John Barch. Cole will be talking about stress in first-generation students. So we'll pull up your slide and let Cole get on screen. Oh.
I want you to ask yourself a question. Were you the first person in your family to graduate from college, or are you about to be? If you are, then you are a first-generation student. The purpose of my thesis was to look at differences between first-generation students and their continuing generation peers. So in the fall of 2021, in their first semester of college, I had introduction to psychology students take a survey, both at the beginning and end of the semester. And some things that this survey asked was for them to report their overall stress, their academic motivations towards school, whether they felt engaged in school, and whether or not they even liked school to begin with. And what I found was striking. First-generation students reported higher levels of stress, both at the beginning and end of the semester. Even more surprising, at the beginning of the semester, these same students reported higher levels of intrinsic motivation for school. Sadly, by the end of the semester, this motivation was lost. And even worse, these students were starting to dislike school more than their peers. And it had a negative overall effect on their learning involvement throughout the semester. So I ran a prediction model, and I saw that perceived levels of competence was the most important factor in predicting stress, both at the beginning and at the end of the semester. And that these two variables were negatively correlated. As levels of competence went down, student stress went up. So I think it's on us, the faculty and the administration, to reach out to these students and to pull them into our world, whether that's academia or business. If we can raise levels of competence, we can hopefully reduce student stress. And by doing this, we can hope to increase performance while also keeping retention rates high. For anything that we do to help first generation students, this can easily translate to continuing generation students as well, making sure all students are helped. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. All right. So we're on our next trivia time. This is admittedly easier for some than others. What is the name of NMU's newest graduate degree program?
We've got a response from a panelist. And that one is close. We've got a response from a viewer, and that one is, it's not quite right. We have an answer, a correct answer. Elizabeth, once again, you got it.
It's very new. That would be the explanation for the other answers. All right, we're going to move on to our next presenter, but also mention that this program is offered online, or at least in a hybrid format. So in case anybody out there is thinking about it and is not physically here, it's an option. So our next presenter is Nadine Sikora. Nadine's a graduate student in exercise science, and the advisor is Dr. Liz Warrenin. Her talk is going to be about the effects of exogenous testosterone in individuals on hormone replacement therapy for testosterone. And Nadine will also be able to say the words better than me. All right, Nadine, we'll let you come up.
Thanks, Janelle. When each of us got ready this morning, we looked at ourselves in the mirror, and maybe for many of us, we recognize what we see. We're happy with what we see, but for some of us, we're not happy. What we look at in the mirror might cause some feelings of depression or anxiety or just general disconnect. For some, this can be described as gender dysphoria. Now, imagine feeling this way every single day. One thing that we can do to improve one's feelings towards themselves is through improving mental health. We know that physical activity reduces reports of poor mental health days by 43% when consistent. However, all of the research that exists has been conducted on the cisgender population and largely conducted on individuals assigned male at birth. My novel research will expand on the literature written for the cisgender population, and as the only study of its kind, it examined how hormone replacement therapy for testosterone for gender-affirming care is interacting in one's body. Testosterone is a sex steroid, commonly known for body fat redistribution and changes in strength. Individuals on hormone replacement therapy are introduced to exogenous testosterone, or testosterone from outside of the body, to achieve a desired change. My participants were asked to exercise 3 days per week for 8 weeks. We had 3 separate testing sessions that examined participants' changes in weight, body composition using a dual X-ray machine, levels of compassion, changes in strength using 2 different tests for strength, the chest press and the leg press. And finally, I examined any possible changes in endogenous testosterone or naturally occurring testosterone due to the exercise selections made. The result of the blood samples will allow for me to better identify ways in which we, as researchers, can provide exercise guidelines for transgender individuals. Of special interest to me is the ability that I will have to provide answers to individuals looking to change their bodies without the use of hormone replacement therapy. During each testing sessions, participants were tested once before exercise testing and once within 30 minutes of completing the routine. At the present moment, I'm analyzing my data, and one very important thing became apparent. The population is very hard to reach. And this shouldn't come as a surprise because, as you see on my slides, the number of individuals that feel comfortable going into a gym space is limited. Even after collecting all of my data, I met a number of individuals that confided in me that they wanted to participate in my research but felt uncomfortable in the gym setting. It's reasons such as this that make my research ever more important. The result of my research will improve the literature available to provide these guidelines for transgender individuals looking for gender euphoria when looking into the mirror in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadine. I will move us forward through to our next trivia time. This San Francisco-born bookkeeper and enthusiastic traveler who delighted in reciting the Gettysburg Address by heart is the namesake of an award at NMU. Please put your guesses in the Q&A.
Ooh, we've got a couple of responses. They're the same, Peter White, but they are not correct. Oh, we've got another, Charles Spooner, again, not the one we're going for.
Maybe I can give a hint.
We give a hint. Can I?
Yeah.
There we go. Yes, please go ahead, Joelle.
It is a UP Research Award, to be a little more specific. By UP, I mean dealing with UP history and NMU archives.
Okay, we've got another response, 2 more responses, again, the same responses. Bomir, however, not correct.
So close. Should I do one more hint, or should we call it?
I say give a hint.
We'll try one more hint.
Oh, we've got it. That's Grace Magnagi. Have I got that pronounced correctly?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm obviously not on a good word day, so I may not be the person to ask. But yes, the Grace Nagy UP Research Grant. It's in memorial. All right. That means we can move on to our next graduate student. This is Amy Munez. She's a biology student working with Dr. Alec Lindsay, and she'll be talking about mercury and common loon telomeres. And Amy, when you have your image up.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, hello, my name's Amy. I'm going to talk about mercury and how they affect common loon telomeres. So mercury is a neurotoxin that is expelled through industrial processes, and it is naturally occurring in the environment, but it bioaccumulates on the surface of the lakes, on the lake floor, and it gets converted into methylmercury. And then it bioaccumulates up the trophic levels to the common loons, which is like higher up on the trophic level. And what I want to know is, how does this mercury affect the common loon on a genomic level? Specifically, how does it affect the telomeres? And what is a telomere, you ask? Well, it is the nucleotide repeats at the ends of the chromosomes that kind of protect the chromosomes from degradation that happens during DNA replication. So when a cell replicates, a little bit is lost at the end of the DNA, and the telomeres are kind of a sacrificial region of the chromosome, protecting the DNA from losing important information. And once the telomeres get degraded to a certain level, the cell starts to senesce and the organism experiences organ failure and then eventually dies. So telomeres are a good measure of longevity and like life expectancy. So what I'm looking at, I have about 300 blood samples of common loons that have various levels of mercury in their blood that has already been tested. And through quantitative PCR methods, I'm going to amplify the telomeric regions of the genome and see how the amount of telomere in the blood is going to correlate with the amount of mercury in the blood to kind of tell me if the telomeres are shorter. I kind of expect the telomeres to be shorter in individuals with higher amounts of mercury. But I don't have that data quite yet. That's what I'm working on. So hopefully this will help us understand whether or not mercury is impacting the longevity or lifespan of these charismatic icons of the North Country. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and that brings us on to our next trivia time. And this is the best trivia, and I saved it for last. So that means we have the last graduate presenter after this. So this NMU professor was once part of the opening act of the band Led Zeppelin. Let's enter your answers in.
Okay, we've got a couple of responses. Neither of them are correct.
I feel like the wrong guesses might be almost as good as the right ones for this one.
Well, let's see. The incorrect responses so far have been Brent Graves and John Reavers.
Weirdly, they're the correct department. So there's your hint.
Oh, there's a great one. Okay, someone else suggested that perhaps it was Joe Lubig. We need to get back to the biology department. All right, it looks like we've got a correct response, Paul. That is Neil Cumberledge.
Honestly, I tried to find a picture of this actually happening and I couldn't. I'm sorry. Maybe if we can get a hold of Neil in the future, we can find one of those. All right, so that means we have our last graduate presenter. Caro Els is a student in exercise science who's being advised by Dr. Randy Jensen. They'll be talking about maximum external load during max squat protocol with different abdominal stabilizing maneuvers. So Caro, if you got it, there you go. All right, you're set.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so as you're sitting, I want you to take your right hand and place it in the middle of your stomach. Contract your abdominal muscles against your hand and feel the pressure inside your stomach increase. This is a maneuver called abdominal bracing. Now, another way you can increase this pressure is if you pull your belly button into your spine. This is called abdominal hollowing. As a weightlifting coach myself, we instruct both of these maneuvers to increase abdominal pressure, which protects the lower back from excess movement during exercise, which is a cause from lower back pain. It has been well documented in literature that abdominal hollowing and bracing can help stabilize and protect the spine from injury. On my slide, you can see one of my athletes B performing a back squat. We regularly use the back squat to test an athlete's lower body strength. As you can imagine, having a heavy load on your back and squatting to that depth can be quite strenuous for your spine. One day when I was coaching B and instructing her to brace her core, she looked at me and said, "You know, this is kind of difficult to do while I have this weight on my back." And she was right. When you're lifting more than your body weight, your main focus is probably to try and not collapse. You're not really focusing on squeezing your abdominal muscles. So that had the wheels inside my head turn. I know how important abdominal stabilizing is, but how does it affect our athletes when we instruct them to stabilize during a heavy lift? Well, the first thing I did as an academic was look at the published literature, but to date, these maneuvers have only been compared in a therapy setting on single joint movements with just body weight. The effect of instructing these maneuvers during a heavy multi-joint movement in a performance setting like a collegiate weight room is unknown. That is where my research comes in. My participants were instructed to perform a squat to failure during 3 conditions. The first was a control and no instruction day. The second, abdominal hollowing, and the third, abdominal bracing. The participants increased weight each set until they couldn't complete the lift anymore. As you can see on the chart, there was a significant difference between the lost trials of both of these stabilizing maneuvers in comparison to the control day. The stabilizing maneuvers had the participants lift up to 10 kilograms more than when they had no instruction. Our participants were well-trained athletes, so increasing a max squat by 10 kilograms is pretty huge. My study further confirms the importance of abdominal stabilizing maneuvers, even if your athletes complain when they start using them. I encourage coaches to properly coach bracing and hollowing during heavy lifts. Have your athletes practice using these techniques so they can get used to them. Abdominal stabilizing maneuvers not only protect the lower back, but it can increase the maximum amount of weight that an athlete can lift. As a coach who wants my athletes to be safe and lift heavy, it is definitely a win-win in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome. So that means we've rather unfortunately hit the end of our presentations today. So this means you now get a chance to vote on your People's Choice winner for the graduates. And this is also a good chance to type in the Q&As. Once you've put your vote in, please put your vote in first. And then we'll have an extended time to put in question and answers and let some students answer those. And we will also, I'll take this the PowerPoint off for a bit while we total the winners and then pull it back on so we can show you who they are. So we'll do a Q&A with the students visible too. I'm gonna leave it up here while we get the poll.
So I do have a couple of questions that have come in throughout this event. I'll go ahead and start with some of those. The first is to Gwendolyn Murray. Firstly, like to say, great job, awesome. Would topology measure something like wave action on Lake Superior, and how would those waves affect shoreline?
I don't honestly know too much on that. I think that maybe it could, oh, hold on, there. I don't know too much about if it would affect, I would think as far as affecting the shoreline, it would affect the curvature on the shoreline, how it would affect the space of the shoreline, not so much how the waves would look, but more how it would affect the surface area, kind of like a topography sort of effect. If that makes any sense.
I think it does.
The surface area and the surface space.
Okay, yep, and I hear back the questioner, Joe Liebig, has said yes. Thank you so much for your response.
Okay.
We've got a question for Mandy. Why do you think meritocracy appeals to systems?
Okay. Why does it appeal to systems, as in like institutions?
I believe that that was the intent of the question, yes.
Okay. I think it appeals to institutions because it keeps the people that are in power there. It promotes. Oh.
Mandy, okay, I think we, yep, that's okay. Did you want to expound on that? You think that?
Yeah, no, sorry, I was trying to get my video started. I have my laptop in front of me on the table.
Great.
Yeah, no, I think that it appeals to these institutions because it does keep the people that are in power already there. And it allows them to bias themselves, and not necessarily intentionally. A lot of this is unintentional bias and unconscious bias, but it allows them to not only keep the people that are in power there, but it facilitates the people who are already wealthy or have money or have funds to utilize those institutions. And what it comes down to, it really comes down to money and power. So I think if that answers your question.
I do believe so. Thank you so much. Let's see. The next question will be for hold on one second. Okay, will be for Negreno Fernandez. Where do you hope to take your research if it's proven effective?
Right. So, well, if it is proven effective, it could provide kind of a very non-invasive training method that an athlete can use, let's say off season, that they can supplement to the training they're already doing. It would also help bridge the gap between athletes that are starting, recreational athletes that are getting more competitive, and elite athletes that are already performing at the best of their ability.
Okay, wonderful. So that kind of opinion, can your findings be applied to non-recreational runners or athletes?
I do believe so. I focused on running specifically because that's the sport that I like the most. But there's always different methods of being able to perform more efficiently in almost any sport, especially endurance sports, which is what I usually have been looking at. So I think it can be applied, not necessarily the training, the same training I'm doing, but there could be an application that could improve running efficiency, or training efficiency in other sports.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's see, the next question would be for Cole Alexander Holt. Can you explain again how you know that the level of competency is directly tied to stress?
Yeah, so let's just start with competency. In the beginning, me and my advisor were using self-determination theory as the lens for my whole thesis, and competency is it's proposed in the theory, one of the basic psychological needs that all people need for positive well-being, happiness. So we started with self-determination theory first. We started with the variables of competency, autonomy, and relatedness. And we had the students fill out a questionnaire about that. And then when they filled out the survey on stress, I ran a linear regression model, which is that prediction model. And when the numbers came out, it said that competency was the most important factor out of those three to affect stress. And just to clarify on what types of stress the stress survey was asking, it was the college student stress scale, and it measured all kinds of stress that first semester students would have. So it asked about their financial situation, it asked about their home life, it asked about their relationship life, it asked about various different types of things that might have stressors involved. And so even with that linked with self-determination theory, competency was the thing that rose above everything else, both at the beginning and end of the semester.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's see, that was actually a three-part question, and you answered all parts of that question there. Thank you so much. I do have a couple of more questions. If there are others, please add those to the Q&A. We've got one for Aaliyah. What other forms of measurements do you think can be used instead of meritocracy?
That sounds like it's for Mandy.
They've said Aaliyah. That's what I thought as well. I will move on to the next question in this case. we are looking for okay, so I believe that this question would be directed at you, Aaliyah. This is, let's see, does CRCI diminish after chemo in the general population? Are the lasting effects of CRCI always connected to APOE?
Was this a question for me?
It may have been, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
Absolutely. Does CRCI diminish after chemo in the general population? Firstly, and then secondly, are the lasting effects of CRCI always connected to APOE?
Okay, so for the first question, there's kind of some mixed results coming back. Generally, what we see is after each round of chemotherapy a person receives, the severity of CRCIs tends to increase. And then after chemotherapy has completed, and we're talking like years later, it does tend to slowly decrease, but this can be many years. And the second question was related to sorry, I'm what?
Nope, that's fine. I'll ask once again, no problem. Are the lasting effects of CRCI always connected to APOE?
To APOE?
Mm-hmm. And perhaps I'm pronouncing that incorrectly.
The lasting effects,
Well,
the gene, the APOE4.
Yes, APOE.
Okay, sorry.
No, my apologies.
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors that may predispose a person to developing CRCIs. I have a quite narrow focus on the genetic component. There's a lot of hormonal components. Stress is a huge one. Anything that's going to deplete the integrity of the blood-brain barrier. So possibly, but I really don't know. There's a lot of factors in that.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. Do we have any other questions?
The judges are unable to write in the Q&A, but if you all want to just voice a question, that's completely fine. You're able to do that.
Yeah, this is Dan Arnold. Yeah, thank you. I couldn't get into the Q&A. For Nicole, have you done any specific defining of what agents you're talking about here? Chemotherapy is kind of a lay term.
Right. We haven't specifically named chemotherapy drugs. The only thing that we're excluding for sure is participants that have had a hormonal type of cancer. But as for chemotherapeutic agents, that's going to be something that we ask them to report, and I'm going to look at once we have that data. But I'm not going to exclude any particular drugs.
I have a
Are you
question.
there? Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yep, this is Heather Pickett. I have a question for Amy. I was curious what bodies of water you were used in your study for your population of loons.
I used several populations, a lot of lakes in the UP mostly. A lot of my samples that have low concentrations of mercury were from Seney. On the Seney stretch, you might sound familiar. And then another region called the Munising Moraine. That's the region up like by Munising and kind of north of Seney, between Seney and Lake Superior in the UP. That area had high concentrations of mercury. So I got a lot of samples from there. And then I also actually got a portion of samples from a laboratory study that looked at how mercury affects the development of loons in a controlled environment. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
We've got another question for Cole. Are you including mental health in your study, such as like depression and anxiety?
So in this study, we were not screening for it, so it wasn't a question at all. So it's definitely something that should be accounted for, just because it can affect lots of different realms, especially when it comes to stress and relatedness and competency. But for this study, we chose to just keep it a little bit more straightforward.
Okay. We've got another question for, I believe it was Gwendolyn Murray, in reference to topology. Is it possible to compare invariant patterns in math to invariant patterns in reading? And Lisa, if you'd like to expand upon that, go ahead. If you can go ahead and answer that.
I'm happy to. Sorry, I was typing fast. I'm very curious about the connections between understanding number signifiers and understanding letter signifiers. So as you're talking about the malleability of what you're measuring, you mentioned that you pull the donut and you're interested in the way that the batter stretches, or maybe you're not interested in the way the batter stretches, but there's an interpretation of that signifier of the number or of the number sequence or of the equation. And I'm wondering if in your research or in your reading, you ever found connections between the understanding or interpretation of letters and the understanding and interpretation of numbers, because we read them all in sequence.
And when you say the interpretation of numbers or the interpretation as far as reading letters, like as in reading a paragraph, is that
Yeah.
what?
Because I was so interested in topology and the properties of mathematics that you're talking about and those invariant patterns. And it just made me think about what we do when we're reading those letters too. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I mean, you could kind of look at it that way. I guess when I'm talking about the properties of the dough or the batter, when we look at properties of space, we're not looking so much at the numbers or the length of the space. We're looking at how close, how compact is the space. So you could look at it, how many letters are in the words, or how many words are in the sentences, or how many sentences are in the paragraphs, how many paragraphs, how large is your book? So you could look at it that way.
That is an excellent answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Nicole, the question about CRCI and diminishing after chemo was my question as well. And I'm not sure I typed it very well. So I appreciate that you spent a little time answering that question. I was just curious, about whether the measurement, and forgive me for forgetting to put ApoE4 in, was a common diagnostic, diagnostic practice for patients in chemo. And I'll just say that I just recently have been with a patient in chemo and noticed a very sharp decline in cognitive processes that never really came back. So that was the basis of my question.
Right. From what I understand, testing for ApoE4 is relatively new. Before, they were mostly testing for more inflammatory markers. But I don't know a lot of other studies that have narrowed in so much on this gene. But that's what I'm doing.
I think that tells us that you're really onto something, and you have a lot of work to do, and we'll look forward to hearing more of that work, because I know that there are so many questions out there that are not answered when it comes to cancer treatment and chemotherapy. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I'm excited to conduct the study, actually. I hope I find something.
So Nicole, if we'll keep you, just as we're doing some more tallying for judges, we'd like to hear from the presenters what your post research or post graduation plans are as of now. Nicole, if you'll go ahead and start us off, that'd be great.
So after graduation, I am looking to go into a PhD program. I am really quite interested. I work for I don't work. I'm involved with the Upper Michigan Brain Tumor Center, and I'm very interested in glioblastoma treatment, and I want to get into drug delivery systems for glioblastoma.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Let's go with Leah, please, if you wouldn't mind speaking next to your plans.
Yeah, hi. I am currently unsure of which school I will be attending next fall, but I will be heading to graduate school for anthropology. I hope to be a bioarchaeologist and do more chemical testing on archaeological sites. It's a very small field, and it's new and very exciting. There's still so much to learn about sites. So
great, thank you. Then Nahir. Nahir, if you wouldn't mind letting us know your plans next. There you are.
Yes, okay, sorry.
No problem.
So I'm still in my first year of the program. So at the moment, I am waiting back to hear from IRB approval, and hope to start doing some pilot testing by the end of the semester, and then hopefully start testing people and going through the training protocol over the summer. And after that, I do want to continue academia. I love research and the mechanical side of the physics and mechanical side of sports performance. So I don't know specifically where I'm going to go, but that's the route that I'm following at the moment.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Let's hear from Mandy, please.
All right, my video undoing is going a little slow. There we go.
It takes a second. You're with us now, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm looking to start my McNair research here come April, and I'm hoping to do a case study on resignation rates in the Marquette Branch Prison over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. And while I'm doing that / after I do that, I'm also going to be studying abroad in Botswana, Africa, doing community public health until the end of July. And then I'm hoping to graduate in December. So it's going to be a busy summer. I'm also currently an AmeriCorps Vista leader for the next year until January. Yeah, I'm busy. And I work here in the community with substance use disorders, namely the opioid epidemic, addressing that. And after graduation, I would like to go get my PhD in either social policy at Harvard or community research and action at Vanderbilt.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. Let's hear from Cole Alexander Holt, please.
Yeah, so I am currently already accepted into a PhD program back at my alma mater, Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. I'll be going into the brain cognitive and developmental area in their PhD psychology program. And I am very excited to do research involving grit under Dr. Verinda Kalia. I love grit. It's a very interesting field. Other people might be familiar with terms of tenacity or resilience. Grit is just a tad bit different, but I find it very, very interesting. So I can't wait to go in and start doing more school.
Congrats. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's go with Gwendolyn Murray, please.
Hi, okay. I'm going to be also starting my McNair research for this summer, and going to be completing that. And then I have this last year left. I will be applying to PhD programs, hopefully starting next year, the following year, going to PhD program, and going from there and pursuing my PhD in mathematics and topology, continuing my passion. So that's my path.
Great, thank you. We'll hear from Nadine Zakora, please.
Hi. So I'm just finishing up my final semester. And moments before this 3MT competition began, I received my second acceptance to Eastern Carolina University. So I've received one to the University of Oklahoma, both for PhD programs. One is a community health program at Oklahoma, and the one in North Carolina is a bioenergetics program. So I have a very important decision to make, but in either locations, I'm going to be given the opportunity to continue with my current research and continue expanding on it.
Wonderful news. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. It wouldn't have been without all of the help from my, my cohort, my professors in my department, and most importantly, the graduate student office. They've been very helpful throughout this whole process.
Oh, well, thank you for saying so. There's a lot of hard work that goes on behind those doors for sure. We'll hear from Carlo Ellis, please.
Okay, hi.
Yes,
Hi, can you hear
sorry.
me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So I'm currently a strength coach here at NMU. I work with 5 of our athletic teams. I work with women's soccer, women's basketball, women's lacrosse, women's wrestling, and golf. So I am their strength coach at the moment. I'm graduating in May with Nadine. And next year, I'm still going to be a strength coach here at Northern, and I'm hoping to keep trying to bridge the gap between published literature and coaching. There's so many little gaps that people are unaware of, especially when it comes to sports performance. So that's kind of my focus, and I want to do it in the practical setting for a little bit, and maybe a PhD in a couple of years, but that is it for now.
Good. Glad that you've got a good idea on your shoulders. But see, then last but certainly not least, Amy Muniz, please.
Hello. I should be finishing up. This is my last semester here. I still have a little bit of work to do on my thesis, but I'm hoping to go for a PhD at University of Wisconsin-Madison. after I received my master's here at NMU, and then I want to take my knowledge to Hawaii and help the endangered species, the endangered birds out there, because it is the extinction capital of the world. And I've done work in there in the past, and I would like to go back and help preserve the species out on the beautiful islands of Hawaii.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And to all of you presenters, again, thank you so much for all of your time in preparation. It sounds like we have a tally to be able to identify who are the winners.
All right, bear with me while I do a little bit of share screen magic here. Sorry, no great way to do this. Oh man. Oh. Very quickly, this is everything we just did. All right, there we go, we made it. So first up, we have the McNair winners. And if those of us who can unmute, the panel can clap when we get them all up on the screen, that would be amazing. So our McNair winners are, first place is Mandy Bonesteel. Second place is Gwen Murray.
Yeah, Gwen.
And the People's Choice is Mandy again.
Congratulations.
Oh my God, thank you.
Congratulations. People's Choice in first place, line right up. And you all did amazing. Gwen, you did amazing as well. Yeah, that's amazing. It's exciting to get to the end cards. All right. So that means we have our graduate winners. So our first place is Carol Els.
Hey.
The runner-up there is Nicole Thomas. And again, People's Choice is Carol.
Ooh.
It does not always line up like this, but the judges and them, yeah.
Well, these were all amazing. I learned things. I have notes. And I just so appreciate the work that you've all put into this, and that it is such a fun event to just sit and be quiet and listen to the work that you've done and what you have to say. Congratulations to the winners, and thank you to all of you for participating. And Janelle, I didn't mean to start talking.
Nope, that is totally fine. That is exactly it. Yeah, thank you again for everyone for being here, our judges, definitely our participants, because it is a snow day, and
yes,
it's absolutely amazing that all of you still came out and did this. You're all kind of wonderful.
And Carol Els will be now participating in the regional event. And that is an all expense paid trip to Milwaukee. To the Midwest Association of Graduate Schools our annual meeting. And as part of that meeting is the 3MT regional competition. So we will keep you all informed on what happens next. And Carol, I look forward to working with you on that presentation.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Right. Thank you all for being here. I think we will let you continue your snowy days.
Yes.
Thank you.
Another excellent event. Thank you, and
you.
Be safe out there.